Welcome, everyone. Um, it's really special to be here today with all of you, and I am Dr. Melissa Johnson, psychologist and CEO and founder of the Institute for Girls Development and Flourish Therapy and Wellness Center. For those of you not familiar with the Institute or Flourish, we are a psychotherapy practice here in Pasadena. And we have three initiatives to provide empowering strength-based psychotherapy, to provide empowering community education, and also to engage in support and training for professionals, educators, mental health professionals, youth program leaders, and others. And in this time of crisis and loss and grief and recovery, these mission-driven values of our organization are just so important to us and to our community. So we're really grateful to be here today. And I am so grateful to be here today with my friend and colleague, Dr. Francisco Navarro, who is the founder and CEO of Reswell here in Pasadena. He will introduce himself in a moment. We both were really moved by the questions that many of you provided us ahead of time. And we know that this is going to be an ongoing conversation for weeks, months, even years. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. So there are things that we may not get to today, of course, and there are things that are not going to be as relevant today as they will be a month from now or 6 months from now. So we want to provide support today and information today and empowerment today and shared connection about our shared trauma today. And we also want to provide a pathway of resources and information and support that can be available ongoingly. So we will be wrapping up at the end of this time by sending you additional resources and keeping you posted about additional opportunities that the Institute Flourish and Reswell may be collaborating on, which we're really looking forward to. I'm going to share briefly a tiny bit of my story before I hand it over to Dr. Navarro. We did evacuate, my wife and I evacuated for 5 days to a friend's home who graciously gave us space. And when we were ready to return home, 3 friends together texted us and said, "Can we bring you water? And how else can we help?" And I really loved that question because we did have some things we wanted help with. Yes, we wanted water. And yes, we wanted help hauling all our stuff up from the cars to the house. And we wanted help changing our air filters, really practical stuff. So they came, they did all that. They talked with us for a little while we shared our stories, which is a really important part of healing for all of us. And then there were hugs. And I have really carried with me into my conversations with so many other people over the last 2 weeks, this idea of, do you need help? Do you need to be heard? Do you need to be hugged? When we returned home, we got all 3, but all 3 isn't necessarily always what's needed. and honoring what people need, what we each need, which is going to be different in each moment, is so valuable. So the question of, do you need to be helped, hugged, or heard, is a question that I have been asking others, and that I ask myself when someone says to me, what can I do? Um, So we'll be talking more today. And Francisco, um, please share.
Sure. Thank you, Melissa, for sharing your personal experience and vulnerability, and then inviting us to collaborate like this and be together in community. Um, so I'm Francisco Navarro. I'm the founder and CEO of Reswell here in Pasadena. Our focus is on approaching treatment by a full integrative approach to children, teens, adults, really families. So we take the whole person approach. For those who don't know, we have very simple vision, and that is to optimize treatment for people, educate the public, and eradicate the stigma of getting help. And I think about that as more stigma as an epidemic, when it's not pathology. So it's interesting that that gets in the way of sometimes getting help. So our hope is that we can do some of that today too, is to help eradicate that stigma of getting the help that you need. Um, with that being said, I too, one of the few people that I reached out during this whole thing was Melissa, and she and I are colleagues, but also friends and walking buddies. And um, that day was a difficult one for my family, because not only am I have my clinic here, I was about a couple of miles away, maybe even less than that, when this broke. I was actually working from home, which I typically don't do. I'm usually in the office, and because I was getting over a cold, and I walked outside and didn't see anything except for the wind, and then 15 minutes later this happened. And not only was I exposed to it, but my family was too, and that was impactful. So you can imagine, all you can think is whatever everyone else thinks, which is either let's wet down the house and turn on sprinklers and run out of there, right? So we just went with our cars, our family, and our pet, and came to a meeting point here. And we came here to our clinic to really just ground ourselves, just like everyone who has been experiencing, and just not that day, but the continuing days, feeling that physiologic response of confusion, adrenaline pumping. We just came here and we asked one simple question: what do we do? What do we need to do next? Not sure if we were going to have a home or not to go back to, but happy to be together. But what did we need to do next? We had Ash, which is our dog, and he was hungry. So first thing we did is let's go to the pet store, buy some food. And from there, we took off to be with family closer to Orange County, just kind of get out of the way. Um, and that was it. But I continued to come and be with community here and see patients. And I started to hear a lot of stories right away. And so I share that story only to let you know that I'm here along with the narrative, and survivorship. The survivorship story is one of a spectrum. Some unfortunately have lost their lives, and others have been part of this community, not knowing how to help but want to help. So if you're here, this talk is really for you to have any part of this spectrum of how, one, seek help that you need for yourself or your children, and or for others, but also to be educated about how to understand how to respond to when you're feeling like, is it Tuesday? Is it Friday? What day is it? I'm not sure yet. Um, we'll talk to some of those things today. So I look forward to having your attention for 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 Melissa and myself to share some insights, and we'll have some time for question and answers towards the end of this.
Thank you, Francisco, for sharing, as well about your own personal journey. Again, just being able to share stories is so important, and that idea of a continuum of survivorship, that we've all been through something.
Mhm.
And I think, I know what we're hearing from children, teens, adults, families, and I know that you're hearing many of these as well. And these were some of the questions in our registration form. We're about, I'm feeling big emotions. My children are feeling big emotions.
Mhm.
Um, what do we do about that? Or I'm stuck in fight, flight, or freeze. I'm just stuck there. How do I get out of that? My child is afraid to be away from me. Um, we're all having trouble sleeping.
Mhm.
I didn't lose anything. Why do I feel so bad? I shouldn't feel so bad. Um, and as you and I have been talking through this experience and process, we really know that these are all very common responses for children, teens, and adults, and that these are understandable responses. And to be able to acknowledge that and then be able to have ways of working our way through this is really valuable. And I want I'm excited and eager to talk about what those things are that we can do. Um, but starting with acceptance, right? It's starting with acknowledgement that what I am experiencing is common and what I am experiencing is understandable. And I can be gentle with myself around that. And it's not going to last forever. Um, Much more to say about that, Francisco. Dr.
Mhm.
Navarro, what are you hearing as well? And what do you want to
Yeah.
speak to about that?
Yeah, the spectrum of that too, right? There's a spectrum of this too, just sort of responses, right? I think first of all, making sure we're not assuming how people respond to moments like this, right? And then also not projecting our own emotions onto others, especially children, if you have young ones, um, or school-age children, and even adolescents, right? To not project your own emotions onto and that's hard to do because you're going through your own process of recovery here. But yes, like people having moments where they're just sort of collapsing in emotion, right? From children, teens, and adults, right? And and not knowing why that's happening and getting a reason and an explanation of why that's happening. And to them, I share the body responds this way when it feels overwhelmed, right? And it happens in the supermarket. It may happen while you're driving in your car. It may happen when you're visualizing your house that didn't get affected like others, right? And I'll be lying to you if it didn't happen to me when I was driving and I saw what I saw, right? It's difficult. And so allowing yourself to have self-compassion, some permission there to be okay with these normal responses to something so tragic like this, right, in our community. And it's not just ours. I mean, there's also Pacific Palisades. I was in contact with a lot of other people out there too. And so it really is more of a county-wide communal trauma that we're experiencing. And so really right now, these are normal responses to moments like this, especially eating differences and changes. So some people might want to eat more, or some people may lose appetite. We tend to move more towards comfort foods, sugar, baked goods, snacks, things that are not good for us, right? Is what we do. And as parents, we want to soothe our children. So we're like, what do you want? You want hot Cheetos? Here you go, right? Probably not the best choices, but at the moment, we're trying to self-soothe and figure this out. So limit some of those things and come back to some routine if you can. right? With sleeping, which is a big challenge because that's probably contributes to confusion, disorientation, what day is it sort of experiences. And no, you're not having early signs of Alzheimer's, right? But it does feel this way when we're feeling sort of very confused or we're losing memory, right? Or having memory lapses. Some of it is contributed to poor sleep. So if you're lacking sleep, and it's only a couple of hours and you're trying to live on just 2 hours, that's not healthy for functioning. That contributes to the freeze functioning of your daily life. So with children specifically, if they already have had their own routines, but they're feeling afraid, this is not a time to try to enforce those routines. You can get back to it, but right now, when there's a need to feel safe and to be close, the little ones, especially toddlers and preschool age, they want to be close to people they feel safe to. So if they're clinging on to you, that's a normal response. Allow that to happen. If they're needing to sleep in your bedroom, allow that to happen. The school age kids are also asking for that, like, right? Because when's are coming? Are they not coming? And as adults, we're also having those triggers because it's still so fresh, right? So I would say be flexible right now, be lenient right now with some of it, and slowly get back into routine, right? And at my home, we all kind of camped out in the living room space because we needed purifiers to be going at the same time, and we didn't have electricity until last Friday. So I went to Home Depot, purchased these generators, and I just had the purifiers. And my staff would tell you I would bring the generators with me in charge of being here in the office. I can bring them back home and keep the purifiers going because we have a couple of pets, our dog and our birds, and my son and my wife, of course. And so we were, okay, if we can concentrate purifying the air here, this was another way of figuring out how to, yes, this is not normal, but can we make this an experience of being together, remaining safe, breaking that routine a little bit. So if someone is having potentially discomfort at night and falling asleep, we can assess that, right? So that's happening a lot. I had a story yesterday from a parent managing a child who, in the middle of the night, woke up trembling, shaking. Right. In that situation, what's important to do is find grounding strategies, calming tools, and Dr. Johnson's great at these, to be able to bring the central nervous system. That might mean you might just want to maybe hug your child, make them feel safe, right? And maybe, okay, why don't you come into our bed and lay down this night here? Again, important safety right now is important to do, and these practical approaches um, to getting back to a baseline, which we will.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Francisco. That I think the piece about routines is something that I think about with my clients as well. And when there has been this kind of a disruption where we may not be in our own homes, or even if we are in our own homes, things are different, like camping out in the living room. And so the cues that our children use to know when it's time to sleep or when it's time to eat, those those cues are, even when we have are established, reestablishing a routine, there's so many cues that our children are paying attention to that may not be present right now. And so those transitions become more difficult for them and can contribute to those bigger emotions. And so, again, just being aware that not all the cues are there that our children rely on in their bodies and in
Mhm.
their environments, to let them know it's time to prepare for sleep. It's time to eat a meal together. It's time to nourish our bodies. It's time to move our bodies. Um, One of the things that I also find myself sharing with people that I know and young people and adults that I work with is being able to really validate and acknowledge whatever it is that they are experiencing. I think of validation as empathy plus.
Mhm.
It's like, yes, I get that you're really sad. I see that you're really angry, and it makes sense. It makes sense. Our common responses right now, often in our minds, think, well, that doesn't make sense. Why do I, why am I getting so mad? Why am I bursting out in tears? Why am I not concentrating? I can't prep for this test. I'm having trouble concentrating on this work project. So empathy plus, it's like, yes, I feel this way. Yes, you feel this way. And it makes sense. And then to be able to say to others, for those of us looking for things to say to others, to be able to say, it makes sense. And a lot of teens are feeling this way right now.
Mhm.
A lot of adults are feeling this way right now. A lot of people in our neighborhood are feeling this way right now. And to be able to provide that validation aspect as well, it makes sense. And a lot of people are feeling this right now. When when kids and adults and even myself are ready, I can think about asking others and myself, how do I see other people coping well with this? Or
Yeah.
what do I see other people doing? I think this is especially a great conversation to have with children and teens when they're ready, to be able to just notice and reflect. Oh, so and so invited me over for a play date, and that felt really good. Or so and so gave me a card, a note, and that felt really good. And being able to notice what other people are doing to cope and to care, um, is another thing that I know both Francisco and I want to talk about more, because that piece of empowerment, the idea of being able to do something, do something. We know from the research and we know from our experience that doing something is a way to help get out of fight, flight, and freeze. Doing something, even if it's a small thing, is a way to begin to reestablish a sense of control in a situation that has been so out of control that we still can't even fully take in what has happened. So being able to do something, and that something might be with a teenager and a younger school age child, to be able to say thank you for playing that game with your sister because it helped her feel better. Or that was really kind of you to text Sandra, because I'm sure she really appreciated hearing from you. So
Mm.
thinking about what to do and then noticing, oh, you did something, or let's cook a meal together. That's doing something. let's take a walk together. That's doing something if it's safe to take a walk. Um, so the doing something becomes part of the healing process, and being able to underscore that when we notice it in our kids and teens, and when we can support it in our kids and teens, giving them choices about what they want to do. Again, the choice piece is so important in terms of recovering some sense of control.
Absolutely. I think all of that is important. When the central nervous system gets charged like it has, right? The brain, along with the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, which is sort of the outside of the brain part, is pumped with adrenaline and all these things. There is this need to do something. There's this need to move your body. Some people, when they freeze, they sort of clutch down and sort of are in that moment of freeze mode. And then other people will pace, right? I'm a pacer, which is uh, why I have a standing desk here. And so, but pacing is one way to get out that energy, right? And so I think if you can pair it purposefully, like you're describing, I think it goes even further. Again, the research does show that we need to do and move forward. Um, the nice thing though, when we do it in community, that is magic, right? And to that, I'll add that with the recent advisories prior to this happening, that the Surgeon General addressed about the loneliness epidemic that exists here in America is significant. Right? 20% of people feel this way. And now we layer it with this ev event, the fires. People tend to isolate. This is not the time to do that. Um, the time is to be connected. Go have your children go on a hangout for someone who's reaching out, allowing that. That might give parents an opportunity to get on the phone and start calling the insurance for the claim and all those different things that need to happen. So you're, especially the young children, to not be exposed to that. And I guess one warning, if people are reaching out to help you have their child be in community with another child, to just give them a little reminder that they're looking forward to the hangout, but to make sure not to discuss the fire, especially if they were in Altadena and that close to it, because that could be triggering, right? These children and teens are looking not to talk about that right now. This is not the right. There will be time to do this. They're just trying to have a distraction and they're trying to have fun, right? And so trying to find opportunities for children and adolescents to find a way to get distracted and have fun, right? Even a simple thing at home, if to avoid the news has been very traumatizing for many, and not just the news on cable news, but also on social media. I mean, it is endless. Probably not the best thing for us to do as a community right now. Probably best to put a rom-com on, to do something that gets you and shifts your mind into something that can maybe induce some humor so that you can have a little bit of respite in this moment that is so necessary and needed by many. But in community to do that is important. One of the core symptoms of depression that we see is isolation, is withdrawal, right? And so again, you layer that with a tragic fire like this, then we're talking about the risk of other things happening, that put you in a worse position. So if there is shame or guilt or embarrassment, this is a very common experience that people are also having, to allow yourself to know that many are feeling this way. And if you're not feeling this way, I would say feel free to reach out to those in your community, if you're safe, of course, to be able to make that effort. And that's another way to volunteer. The city is inundated from what I hear with volunteers, which is so amazing to see that. And we're in this heroic phase of the trauma, which is wonderful to see because it brings community together. But they're turning away volunteers. What I'm telling those people right now is fill up your cup, focus on your own needs right now, because this is a long game. There will be a month out, 3 months out, 6 months out, couple years out, opportunity to volunteer in a different kind of way. So take your time with this. This is a long journey that Melissa and I have been talking about of how to really focus on that piece. Because right now there is a lot of wonderful, you can see it in the corners um, that people are doing their part, but that will end. I don't know how soon, but that will end. And so I think the real work will start then um, for recovery. So I just want to share those little things in the moment that I'm hearing and seeing and observing of our community members here in Pasadena.
I really, I really love that, Francisco, the idea of filling our cups now, if we are in a position to do so. Um, because um, it is, it, as we said at the beginning, it's a long journey, and there's a lot of impulse to help in
Mhm.
the immediate moment. And it's a very beautiful human response. And then people get back into life as they do when there's been a loss or a death, on a, more singular level. And this is a big community level, and knowing that there will be time and opportunity, or opportunities that we may not even be able to imagine yet, will be coming down the road at 6 months or longer. I also love and appreciate and often repeat something that you say, which is community is medicine, and that we really are able, as we maybe even need to kind of push ourselves out of an isolation tendency, to be able to benefit, um, just even the things the hormones our brain generates to, you know, feel good in connection, is so healing for us. It really is medicine, our bodies and our minds, and the connecting can be face to face, like you and I having an intense conversation about something, but it can also be shoulder to shoulder. It can be doing something together, taking a walk together, putting a bunch of art supplies out on the table and just drawing or painting or creating, um, shoulder to shoulder. And that is also a really valuable way to connect. And for our kids, sometimes that's a more comfortable way for them to connect, is shoulder to shoulder, doing some activity together. Like you said, getting together, and maybe they need to tell their story,
Mhm.
and maybe they need to just make slime, you
Right,
know?
right, right. Exactly, exactly. And you make a good point about the adolescent population. There's many times that I've been here in the room with a teen boy, and it feels uncomfortable for them to be sitting across another adult and sharing their feelings, right, and thoughts, and you quickly pick up, okay, this is not going to work. Why don't we go out for a walk? Go out for a walk, and all of a sudden, with movement, it's an interesting thing that happens with the brain. With movement, it creates connections, right? Because we're using compound effects, and it's sort of trying to make connections as we're moving our body. And with that, you'll get some traction about even some of the adolescents that seem to have to be very guarded are able to now share, right? Because we're just walking, we're doing an activity together. And so I think that's a good point of being able to do that, could
Yeah.
be helpful for some to get the narrative out, because that is going to be part of the future treatment for those who are affected and impacted in terms of their level of function, to move through this narrative, telling the story is healing,
Yeah.
telling the story. So don't
Yes.
feel guilty about sharing your story, because you might feel like, oh, am I burdening someone with what I'm going through? I would actually say lean into telling your story, because that's going to be healing for you, right? Um, and I always say use the power of mirror neurons. So our brain has this ability, to mirror behavior. So you as adults and parents, right, if you have little ones around you and teens, and you're mirroring, I know this might be difficult during this time, but if you're mirroring certain behaviors that are adaptive and good coping strategies, right, that children will mirror their parents. It's so much more about what you do than what you are saying in terms of behavior, if you want your children to sort of follow along. Because if you're telling them to do something, you're doing the opposite. Guess what? They're not going to respond to that very well.
I know the other thing that you and I have been having conversations about is how how to know when it's time for people to step up their level of support.
Mhm,
So coming to webinars, coming
mhm,
to community meetings, gathering with faith communities, school communities, letting community be medicine. And
mhm,
then sometimes, maybe at some point in the journey for some people, um, we need more.
yeah,
So let's talk a little bit about how to know when we need. I I think about, as I talk to adults who may be concerned about their children or themselves, um, one of the things I think about is just what an individual is bringing to life to begin with. What is their sensory style? Because depending on their sensory style and how they take in and process things, we're all taking in this experience differently. What other things have we been through in our lives that this
mhm,
may activate reminders upon reminders? Um, what is the age of the person? How disrupted is what we might call in our business, daily functioning? How
mhm,
disrupted is that in terms of concentration, sleep, and all of that? So there are the things that we generally think about to watch out for, um, in recommending whether somebody seeks additional psychotherapeutic or psychiatric support, um, to promote resilience. That's what this is about. And then is the idea of, do you want more support? Like, do you just want somebody to talk to? Maybe it's, in our lingo would be not necessarily clinically necessary, but do you want it?
mhm.
Would it feel good? And that's another way of determining more help. what about for you, Francisco? What are the things that you think
I mean,
about
yes, to what you just
around that?
shared, I think that's important. And one thing that I'm making sure people are keeping to, and be less flexible about, is those who have medical conditions, right? And make sure you're being consistent with your treatment. Something like this can be very dysregulating, and all of a sudden missing doses, whether it's blood pressure or diabetes meds or things like that, or anxiety med. This is the right time to be very consistent with it. And the other part of this is, this was January. A lot of people do this dry January. A lot of adults do this dry January. By day 7, that was done for them. And so I would be careful with using substances. A lot of people use them to sort of calm themselves down, particularly alcohol. And so being careful about that, especially if you're taking medicine, to not increase your use of that as a way to cope, right? So I would say be very careful with mismanagement of substances right now too. It's a very important topic. And the other one is how teens are the highest risk of self-medicating, if you will, with substances to cope with what they're feeling. Right? They may have not had a prior underlying anxiety disorder or anything like that, and all of a sudden they're feeling really uncomfortable, and they're leaning on some of these things. So being observant of how your children are managing is important during this time, because I would say they're the highest at risk. The teens are, when it comes to this. And again, don't forget to nourish your body, hydrate, right? Making sure these things are happening. Be flexible with it. Um, for those that know me, I have a pretty rigid routine in the morning that is out the door during this time, and working out looks differently, right? It looks more sometimes walking the dog late at night. And so be adaptable, be flexible, be compassionate, allow yourself grace. Uh, This is not your fault. This is not your fault. There are things that happen to people is not your fault. You can review and ruminate at night when you're trying to fall asleep that you could have done something differently. It doesn't work that way when we have natural disasters like this. So this is not, have grace. Allow yourself to have grace, and forgiveness there, is really important. I would add that too for people who are listening.
Yeah. Flexibility where it's appropriate, and then deep self-compassion as well. It's not an easy practice in the best of times. So being compassionate and kind with ourselves in a time like this can be really a growthful challenge. But I think it really does tie into that idea of what some people call post-traumatic growth, and that idea that we can develop our community, our resilience, and our self-compassion um, during these times. And it might just be, giving ourselves a hug, um, speaking kind words to ourselves and others, and getting comfortable with what is often the uncomfortable act of asking for help.
Specifically for those who are not able to be kind to themselves and are having difficult thoughts that could be harmful. um, I would advise for those, if you're hearing someone, to make sure that they are getting the appropriate help that they need at this time. So that
Yes.
should be shared, even though it's not something we want to hear as we're trying to move through recovery. But for those who are having a very difficult time right now, that would be probably my my thoughts around people getting support that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. I, and I think too, when there is less less of, nourishing food being taken in and bigger emotions, it sets us up for being more at risk for some self-harm behaviors um, or suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts. And so we want to really encourage everyone to take those concerns seriously and reach out for support.
Absolutely.
Any last words before we go to Q&A, Francisco?
Yeah, I would say this is a really important time to be kind to each other, and and to be here in community. And this is not the time to be harsh with others. This is a time for us to be kind with whether it's at work, whether it's with family, whether it's with friends, um, and know that that you're not alone here in this community. I think there's a time where I feel very protective of our community at large, for people talking about what happened, who made mistakes, who our community right now is wanting to make sure, do we have clean water? Can I take a hot shower? Do I have electricity yet? Do I have gas? All of these things are really, really important. And so I think being able to focus on safety, basic needs, that's what's important. The other things, we're not here to label anything at this moment. This is just sort of finding and connecting with your narrative and be in community about this, so that when you do need help, there is this safety net, this encatchment, right? Some of the happiness research has shown that um, the biggest sort of the best prognosis for people to be in and avoid low low moods and maybe depression is to be in a network. That is the most protective, right? And so I think it's important to leverage that research and bring it into some of the research that's around recovery from trauma. So, and you don't have to say anything. You don't have to share anything. Just being in community, just being in sharing space is enough.
One of the questions, and folks, feel free to add additional questions to the chat, is this idea of, for children who do understandably and naturally look to their parents to keep them safe, and then feel like we weren't able to be kept safe. Um, how, how can we help kids reestablish that fundamental sense of safety?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really thinking about this in a stepwise fashion, right? And finding a way to ground, like that we're here together is important to identify that, especially if no one is physically injured by the fire. And to ask, right, to ask those questions, because children have very insightful ideas, to ask them, what would help you feel safe right now? Right? Because we can go back to that narrative of what in that moment, but right now, is there something that I can do? And if I can't give you that right now, is there someone that you think you feel safe with, or being able to share? This is a good time to ask for, again, going back to the idea of community, of where someone may feel safe. There's a beautiful narrative of children going to a school nearby, and the first graders, second graders were around the principal, holding on to the principal, and holding his hand, and he just sort of went with it. What was happening there is that these children felt safe at school with the adults that were there, right? And so maybe at home that might not be where people are feeling, especially some of the adolescent or the younger children, but finding ways to sort of reestablish safety, and recreate opportunity to have that comfort, which is so important. But that is a really important question to address. So it would take a step to, just when we think about with anything, providing steps to get to that place of close to 100% safety with that parent, and that will take time.
Right. I I really love that idea of the steps and thinking about what are the things that children might be able to contribute to
Mhm.
the idea. They're so creative, their imaginations are so amazing. And if they can't speak it, maybe they can draw it.
Yes,
Um, maybe they can tell a story about it with their stuffies. There's lots of different ways to uh, talk about safety. I also think that the idea of looking for the helpers is valuable, because there have been helpers, and that head of school that had children clinging to them um, uh, is a helper. And being able to find the people that we feel safe with and that are the helpers is key. I do know that it can be so hard um, to not be able to sugarcoat what we've been through. And I think for so many parents and teachers and adults, we want to say, well, not that we want to say it, but is there a way we can soften this? And the truth is, this is sad.
mhm,
This is
mhm,
tragic.
right.
This is still unimaginable. I'll
Yeah,
have different words in a couple weeks, but that's what I'm coming up with right now.
yes,
And so to be able to hold that, and our children know it.
that's right.
And so I think there's a bit of a dialectic around, um, you know, Dr. Ashley Reed at the Institute wrote a children's book last weekend, and it's available online, open source now. And one of the things that she does, it's for kids 0 to 5, and it's about how it's the story of the fire and how the fire broke broke the houses in language that's very concrete for little ones. And it can be hard to tell your child, our house is broken. And it's broken in a way that it can't get fixed. Um, and yet that is the truth. And then finding, as you say, Francisco, the community connection, the safe people. I mean, there's all of that. And our kids know that something really devastating has happened. And we can't pretend that it hasn't with them. And I think it goes against so much of wanting to protect our kids from suffering.
Mhm, mhm.
And so um, I would just encourage us to be able to support each other in holding all of that. And I will put the information about Ashley's book in the follow-up email for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the honesty piece is so important with children, and that's age appropriate. Um, and that because younger children, of course, have more magical thinking, and it's
Yeah,
maybe certain concepts aren't haven't abstracted yet
yeah,
compared to the adolescent, some of the school age children. So, um, but I want one group, right, that we haven't talked about is pets, right? Some people had to leave pets behind or and or lost pets and hopefully can be, reunited with families. But that's another part for children, right, of having that conversation if that happened, right?
yeah.
Because these are family members for many, and they give us so much more in terms of, I mean, the research is clear about how animals help us with our mental health, which is probably why we have four animals in our house, but that's a different story. But there's this idea of making sure that we can have these conversations too, if there has been some lost pets for children and for adults too. I think that's important to not minimize. That came up on a conversation I just came out of with Trauma Network and talking about pets and how that's an important piece to make sure it doesn't get minimized or overlooked. Well, Melissa, it's been wonderful. I don't know if we're at the end here or if there's more questions.
Yeah, there is one more. Are there any support groups yet for teens or adults who have lost their homes?
Mm.
I mean, yes, there do seem to be.
Yes.
Um, we are we are organizing some at the Institute and Flourish. Um, for all ages and all genders. We'll put some information in the follow-up email about those two. And um, do you want to add
Yes. Yeah,
to
we are
that?
too. Yeah, we are too. We're identifying especially for the families who have lost their home and our practice
Yeah,
and prioritizing their needs first right now, and then also thinking through because we have to also make sure it's age appropriate for the adolescent population.
yeah.
And what I am hearing currently is that families are not there yet, but we are getting ready to be able to provide those support groups to our community at large.
One of the things that we're finding, because as you know, Francisco, we do so many groups at the Institute for all ages and from the little ones to adults, and those are ongoing. So the first week, um, the groups didn't meet because there was um, everyone was in very much about figuring out how to survive and where to be and how to be physically safe. But the groups have resumed again. And one of the things that our therapy team has been talking about is that while those groups are not the, they weren't a wildfire support group, they are right now.
Mm,
So these
great.
existing groups of kids coming together, parents coming together, LGBTQ kids coming together, is very much about, I mean, sometimes they just want to make slime, and
Mhm.
other times they really want to talk about their stories. and want to support each other, and they have questions about the kinds of things that we've been talking about today. And so it's really beautiful to see them coming together in their to see young people and parents and adults coming together and supporting each other through this in a pre-existing community of safety.
That's wonderful to be able to pivot that group like that and be able to give them a trusted space already to have. I think that's wonderful.
Right. So we will have materials to get out to everyone. We will keep you posted about other opportunities like this and more opportunities for groups and support. Um, just really appreciate being in community with you all, and very grateful to you, Francisco, for your friendship and our collaborative work together.
Thank you, Melissa. Look forward to more of how we can continue to help our community together. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone
Yeah.
for listening. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you, everyone.